Well, I'm delighted to be here today, and I am in my role as co-director of Sustainable Living Coalition, and I have Stuart Valentine, my valiant co-director. So you got both parts of the co-directorship.
That's right.
So we're going to talk about the Sustainable Living Coalition, what it is that we do, and what do we believe in, and how do we serve the community? So, Stuart, you were there at the very beginning. I jumped in a little bit later, so give us a little bit of a historical background.
Sure. Well, let's start with the name, Sustainable Living Coalition. The idea behind the founder's vision, Grover Stock, with Lonnie Gamble, and there were other community members, myself included, involved in putting together an organization that would support the unfolding demonstration of sustainable living strategies through a community bottom-up coalition building process. The idea being that and a lot of this Sustainable Living Coalition was informed by permaculture principles. And of course, permaculture really pays attention to locally sourced solutions based on climate, soil, and local conditions. So the idea was, our journey to a more sustainable future is not a monocropped solution that gets, disseminated at scale globally. It's actually an engagement, a community-oriented engagement process that grows from the bottom up, locally, contextually relevant solutions for more sustainable living. So that, and of course, we're in Fairfield, Iowa. What is Fairfield, Iowa most known for in terms of, we're known about education because of our university history. And of course, we're embedded in the agricultural system of the industrial agricultural setting of the Midwest. So that was our context, how to focus on issues such as renewable energy and enhancing local food systems to bring more sustainable living into demonstratable, visible example here in Fairfield.
That's great. So yeah, we started out probably with a kind of a larger palette, and we have kind of evolved into more of a focus on local agriculture, because local food systems, because that's pretty important. As the West dries out, and now I read a report that it's possible the Colorado River will run out of water. Well, and in a place where we have the best farm ground in the world, we have, I think, the most concentrated amount of farm ground where you can grow crops without irrigation. And 100, 120 years ago, 90% of what we ate was grown here, now 10%. And so this is a highly skewed system that begs to come back into order.
Back into balance.
Back into balance, really back into balance. It's orderly now, but it's not really balanced. And so that's one of the elements that we're thinking about.
Yeah, and one of the strategies is this old idea of build on your strengths. Well, we have agricultural infrastructure all around us. How do we tune the dial to rebalance that, monocropping industrial ag model delivering commodity crops at very high efficiency, but relatively low utility when it comes to our table food? The old adage is, you need your lawyer maybe once a year, once every couple of years. You need your CPA every year, but boy, you're in relationship with your farmer 3 times a day, hopefully if you're fortunate. And so reminding our community about the importance of food, the quality of our food, and this concept of food resilience. Now, during COVID, we all learned with kind of a sharp relief, like what happens when you walk into a grocery store and there's nothing there.
Right.
Well, not that we are advocating that we're going to do 100% of our food supply right here locally, but we have plenty of opportunity, again, to rebalance the equation, develop a more robust production supply chain, grow this food ideally organically so that it optimizes health attributes, and create more food resilience internally. Now, we do this in a number of ways. As you know, Bob, you've been the champion of this, is that We also, by virtue of the good fortune of our legacy, we have this 12-acre property. On that property, over the years, we've been able to build the Eco Bar and Conference Center, which serves this component of our mission, which is to build coalitions, to bring people together to educate and to talk through locally relevant opportunities to, again, build a more sustainable living model for Fairfield.
You know, it's so fascinating that this is a great example of a complex system in action where no one knew, in 2004 we started, no one knew what this animal was going to actually look like. And it's been a long development process. I remember we were putting plaster on the walls of the Eco Barn on my birthday in 2009.
Yeah, right.
And it took about 10, 11 years to go through the iterations to get the place looking and feeling like it is now. And we made a lot of experiments. One of them was the Southeast Iowa Food Hub. I think in 2015, one of our local folks who was functioning as a local food coordinator said, you know, we ought to have a food hub. And I go, what's that? And she goes, well, it's a thing where you aggregate food and then distribute it. I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. So we put it together, got it funded, and it ran as an actual aggregator for a couple of years. That turned out, the actual economic model turned out to be a little bit problematic. But from that start, Barbara Stone became our executive director. She began to talk with other food hub managers around the state, or food hub-like organizations. And out of that has come this incredibly robust effort that is, I think the Iowa Food Coalition is the overarching, if I've got the name right, overarching organizational structure, kind of non-point value and not terribly hierarchical, but very, very powerful structure. And the food hub managers are now managing $5 million worth of federal money, buying food from high-quality food from local farmers, delivering it to food banks and schools across all of Iowa. And those two grants that we wrote, that this group, I say we broadly, this group wrote, were judged to be, one of them was, I think, the second highest rated grant, and the other one was the first. Mm-hmm. And so I think this demonstrates one of the principles that we operate by, that we imagine and we start speaking things into reality from our imagination, and then other people join, and then all on a vector of solving an issue. Like you said, how do we live more sustainably? And it's not a matter of it's a nice to. It could potentially be a matter of survival. And so I think that there's a certain edge to our effort, because just because a system is the way it is now, it doesn't mean that it's going to be that way forever. And we would be very well advised to think through possible scenarios and how we could become more resilient and more self-sufficient locally.
Yeah, I mean, I think this example of a statewide organization that acts as a conduit for grant funding to flow into community channels for the growing and distribution of high quality food. That is an example of what you might call a public-private partnership, right?
Yep.
I think the role of the SLC is now to take it to the next step, because I think in order for these sustainable living demonstrations to fully root and become a permanent part of our culture and our society, we need to develop enterprise models that support individuals in these respective functions, whether it's transportation of food, the growing of food, the processing of food, restaurants serving of food. Food systems permeate every aspect of our local economy. And our job, I believe, is the Sustainable Living Coalition, is to take it, let's face it, this future of sustainable living is not going to sustain on grant funding. It has to become its own standalone viable market system with free enterprise principles at work so that individuals see this as an opportunity to come and participate. And I think we're seeing it in examples of Breadtopia and the Fairfield Food Collective. I think we're seeing it in the form of examples throughout this country of transition farming into organics.
Right. Well, locally, Francis Dickey's Dairy is a
perfect example.
Fabulous. You know, the interesting thing is that SLC is just one organization tackling this whole systems idea. If you look at what's happening across the state, and I've been in a couple of conferences, one the Organic Association and the other the Iowa Farmers Union, and it is amazing the work that's being done, and it's not always visible. One of our jobs is to link with other organizations doing this kind of work to make it more powerful, more visible. And you know, another little example that we did, we used federal funding, COVID relief money. We responded to a grant, we created a grant proposal responding to that pot of money. We ended up with a Fairfield Garden Initiative, whereby we established or reestablished 114 food gardens in a town of 10,000 people, distributed 3,500 high-quality plants, developed a tool library, and maybe as important as anything, 18 beautifully filmed by our host here, Werner Elmker, beautifully filmed segments where if you knew nothing about gardening whatsoever, and you just went from the first to the second to the third, you could become a very skilled gardener. And our board member, Faith Reeves, who has done so much work in educating herself and now us on soil fertility, mineralization, and all of that. So I think that's what we wanted to convey today, that we're here as a group of concerned citizens. No one's on salary, everyone is volunteering their time. And yet this has become such a wonderful catalyst for so many very positive things happening in our state.
Well, you took the word out of my mouth. This is the role of the SLC, to catalyze a more robust, thriving, resilient, healthy local economy. And
happy also, right?
Happy, yes, happy also. And, you know, I think this also is, you know, an invitation, this video, for people who may be watching this, who are local to Fairfield, or even if you're in a national setting, to participate. This is a bottom-up passion project, if you will, for individuals who have a particular angle of what that vision of healthy community looks like. And I want to remind, well, I don't need to remind you, Bob, you were there at the front row seat when we did the 2009 Go Green plan for Fairfield under the guidance of Ed Malloy. But the core principle, the core objective of that plan was to grow a sustainability culture. This is not a quick engineering fix exercise that the SLC is involved in, although we're open to quick fixes. But fundamentally at the base of this, we are talking about educating and growing a long-term solution set that will enhance a more resilient and sustainable, thriving economy. And that requires participation across the full spectrum. Again, I would put out, I hope this video disseminates, and people who are listening to this that may not be aware of the SLC, but who desire to get involved in the conversation, we welcome participation.
SustainableLivingCoalition.org. And before we go, I have to open up just one more little topic that Stuart is an expert at. He's a money guy. He's an investments guy. He has been one of the real pioneers in socially responsible investing. And there is a component of the way we think about money, the way we distribute money, the way we think about philanthropy, the relationship between money and happiness and all that, which you deal with every day, dealing primarily with, family and, that kind of thing. So tell us a little bit about that before we go.
Sure. Well, I would say an underlying principle is, first and foremost, everything evolves. Money systems are no different. We've inherited a legacy, 500 plus years of thinking about money in the context of maximizing financial profit, even if it means human slavery is used to generate that profit, or environmental degradation is necessary to generate that profit. These are known in traditional economic theory as externalities, negative externalities. Now, there are positive benefits too, but in service of maximizing financial profit, we have systemically degraded our environment and we've abused human well-being, if you think of this in the last 500 years. Yep. What's underway in the last 50 years is a rethinking of maximizing profit towards what we refer to as a transformational movement towards rebalancing return to include human well-being, environmental restoration and regeneration, and financial profit. You can think of it as a triple bottom line win, or building a win-win-win economic model. So this is all under the umbrella of transforming finance to create a more life-supporting outcome through the process of investing. And, in some ways it's common sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you can understand how we arrived here. Think of arriving on the shores of the United States in the year 1700. Unlimited natural resources and opportunity.
Never run out of them.
If you clear cut one place, you can just go to the next woodlot and continue. Well, we've gone through all that. What really motivated me back, this is in high school, right? Starting to read. Today, you cannot deny every major ecological system is in decline. Whether you're looking at fisheries, timber, soil, water quality. Yep. We are 8 billion people who are living as if it was still the year 1700 and we can just keep clear-cutting forward. Well, that's obviously no longer the case, and part of the SLC's mission and that core fundamental principle of growing a sustainability culture is to educate us all about ways in which we can now start restoring natural capital and restoring health to the environment, because this is a long-term experiment. Humans have a long ways to go. We have huge potential. Let's not pull the rug out from under the human species in service of pursuing financial profit. That doesn't make any sense.
Because there's no guarantee that the experiment's going to work out.
Well, Carl Sagan reminded us that, survival is actually the exception. 90+% of all species that have ever hit this planet have gone extinct. We have this faculty of conscious awareness. We have the faculty of foresight. We have also the greatest adaptability of any species I know of. Let's not get locked into what I call the money first prison, because if we're in the financial profit first prison, that will undermine the conditions for life on this planet. So what we need to simply do is open our awareness, look to be investing for more broad-based positive impacts using a triple bottom line model: environment, social well-being, and financial profit. These days it's being described as impact investing, using the tools of environmental, social, and governance analysis. So the toolbox has been built, and our job is now to demonstrate again its effectiveness in the marketplace for everyday people. I believe that is truly available to anybody today in their investing endeavors. So I encourage people who are watching this to go do a little research on ESG investing and impact investing.
That's so great. Well, and so that kind of brings us back full circle to where we started. What are our roots? To enhance the abundant flows in nature. Nature doesn't have any extra. There's no waste in nature. We can take a look at nature and say, how can we be more like, interestingly, who we are? Because we're not separate from nature. We may feel we're separate from nature, But as they say, she owns the stadium and bats last, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So,
Right. Well, I think here's an underlying sort of perceptual shift. One word that I've used often is that what I was describing earlier, for example, we all grew up with this idea of maximizing financial profit. What nature does is everywhere and always, nature optimizes the
yes.
conditions for a flourishing ecosystem. Nature doesn't monocrop. Nature doesn't maximize. These are two really fundamental principles we have to give up, and we have to replace them. And I keep thinking, what does the SLC fundamentally do? I believe what we do is we facilitate human creativity and capital in its many forms: financial capital, environmental capital, social capital. So we facilitate human creativity and capital to optimize the conditions for growing a flourishing society. And we happen to play this out in the experiment of Fairfield. But we hope,
there you go.
we hope the model of Fairfield can then be shared with others.
Partner,
Bingo.
thank you very much.